Keith Law, ESPN, will join me now to talk a little bit more about this team as they get ready for opening day. Aaron Nola will get the ball. But I think the move of Scott Kingery really has people talking, Keith. And how kind of creative were the Phillies to get this kind of thing done here?
I think it was creative. I think it was also, and it's certainly night and day versus what we were seeing from when Ruben Amaro was in charge. I doubt you'd get any less creative than he was. I think it is also a pretty strong vote of confidence in the team's scouting and player development departments that Kingery, had not played in the big leagues yet. He's obviously performed all the way up through the minors. He's improved at multiple stops as he's gone up through the minors, and this is a strong vote of confidence in his abilities and I think in his makeup that they're willing to make this kind of long-term financial commitment and obviously committing that they believe he's an everyday player even though he has yet to debut in the majors, that they're willing to do all of this and commit to him for that length of time, which really essentially locks up what you would expect to be all or almost all of his productive years in the big leagues.
Yeah, 6 years, $24 million. Do you like the deal? Is this a deal that more teams will start to follow suit or more teams should try to do for guys who have never played in the majors?
Yes. Well, it's not the first one. Evan Longoria, about a few days before he made his debut, he signed a deal just like this. It might have actually been a little bit of a longer-term deal, but it was immediate security for the player. So the player is giving up some potential upside. Scott Kingery turns out to be a four-time All-Star. He's left money on the table, but he gets security. He never really has to worry about money again for the rest of his life. So he's got that locked in, even if he were to not be a good player, have a catastrophic injury, whatever. I think it's an easy call for the player. But if you look in the grand scheme of things, this is not that much money for the Phillies. Yes, they are risking it, that he will come to the big leagues and be productive. He doesn't actually have to be that good to justify this amount of money. They can save a tremendous amount of money if he turns out to be the player that I expect him to become. At least I do think he's going to make a couple of all-star teams. But if it all goes wrong for whatever reason, it's really not – this is not going to sink them. There's no point in this contract where they would look and say, oh, this is preventing us from doing something else that we need to be doing financially.
Right. This is not a big financial commitment by Philadelphia. What kind of player do we think that Kingery will be? The fact that there's really not a spot on the field that he's going to play every day, they're just going to kind of use him as a super utility player. I'm not sure that that's his long-term role, but it seemed that they felt strongly enough that he had to be on this team right away, that they feel that he can help them now.
Right, and he doesn't make the opening day roster if they don't do this. Just for listeners who don't know the sort of baseball contract landscape, you are seeing top prospects like Ronald Acuna with Atlanta. He's in the minors now. I just saw him in minor league camp 24 hours ago. He should be in the big leagues. He's the best prospect in baseball. But by holding him down for about 15 days, they will add another year before he gets to free agency. By signing a player to a long-term contract like this, then teams say, well, we can put you on the opening day roster because we've included, you've either locked him up for that free agent year or gotten a club option, but whatever it is, you've gotten rid of that potential obstacle. I think they want to start Kingery playing multiple positions because there isn't an everyday spot for him. My understanding is he's an elite defender at second base. So if and when that becomes open, he can play there every day. My understanding is he actually looked very good when he played third this spring training, which did surprise me because I didn't think he had a great arm, but apparently it's been more than good enough for him to be able to handle third. And when he has filled in at shortstop, they said, even though he's never played it before, he looked pretty good. He's also played center field. He was a center fielder his first 2 years at the University of Arizona, so he could go out there and do that. I think that flexibility is extremely valuable, and it gives them time. It gives them another half season to watch Maikel Franco. It gives them time to potentially find a trade partner for Cesar Hernandez, who is a very valuable player. And while I think J.P. Crawford's going to be more than just fine, what if he's not that good? What if something goes wrong? Well, then you've got some flexibility. You can put Kingery at short. You can put Kingery at second. Try Hernandez over at short. You have lots of options by having Kingery on the roster.
Keith Law's with us, and you take a look at do you think that Kapler had a lot of pull here that said, guys, I got to have this guy on my team? Or do you think that the front office just recognized this kid's playing too well, we got to figure something out?
it was probably more the front office, but obviously Kapler is going to have input in decisions like that. He has a player development background. He managed a year in the minors with the Red Sox. He worked in player development. He ran player development for the Dodgers for a couple of years. So obviously he's involved in the discussion. He understands this is not just a coach walking in saying, I like this guy.
Right.
He understands the economic side. He understands development curve. And he understands the value of sending a guy back down versus looking at Kingery and saying, he doesn't really have much left to learn in AAA. Let's get him up here now facing better quality pitching. So I'm sure he was involved in the discussion, and every manager is going to want a guy like Kingery who plays like his hair's on fire and who can handle multiple positions. I actually think Kingery's probably going to get plenty of at-bats. It might not be until June that he plays very regularly at one position, but I think he ends the year with 500-plus at-bats because he's going to be in the lineup most nights. They'll just keep moving him around to try to give guys days off, or somebody's a little sore, not ready for the DL, or take 3 days, Kingery will fill in for you.
Well, and that's something Kapler kind of hinted at, was that this type of move was made so that later on in the year the guys are fresh, so that they don't have to play 162 games. It seems like those kind of days are getting numbered for these guys that want to play every single day. These guys are saying, no. We have guys that can spell you that you don't have to do that, and 140 seems to be about the number they want these guys at.
Yes, I think there's increasing awareness around baseball, the toll that playing every day takes on players, the potential increase for injury risk if you're just playing fatigued. You're not really hurt, but you're playing a little tired, then maybe you're more likely to get hurt. We definitely think this is true with pitchers. There's an increasing sense that this is also true for position players, so that giving guys a day off every 10 days or so over the course of the season, all right, so he plays 145 games or something, so 162, probably doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, keeps him fresher, particularly true for teams that think they're going to the postseason. I think you really are going to see that, especially for teams like Cleveland or Washington who feel like we're going to win the division. We've got to make sure we're strong in October. So teams are actually starting to plan all the way back from the beginning of the season. How do we space players out so that by the time they get to September 1st, they're not gassed?
Hey, Keith, is this a move, the type of move, coupled with the Arrieta move, that says the Phillies think they're a playoff team or think that they can make the playoffs?
No, not this year. I really don't. And having talked to them, too, I don't think they view the playoffs as realistic this year. They could end up in second place in the division, certainly. There's two teams in the division that are very bad, and the Mets have very high variance. Mets could be, an 88-win team. That could be a 75-win team. I could see a lot of things going wrong for the Mets, especially on the health side. I do not think the Phillies have anything close to the rotation to get close to 90 wins. It might be more like 87, 88 wins, gets you the NL wild card. But you've got two strong teams behind the Cubs in the Central. You've got, I would say, at least one strong team in Arizona behind the Dodgers in the West. And the Giants and Rockies are at least going to be competitive enough that the Phillies would have to have a ton of things go right this year. However, I think getting Kingery up in regular playing time now, Crawford up regular playing time now, evaluate Franco one way or another at the end of the season, they'll make a decision. They are moving themselves to a point where they're hoping that they enter 2019 where a lot of spots are already set. They've got a lot of young players in the big leagues, and most of those guys will have some experience already, and they'll know exactly what they have going into the year. So
the area where they're lacking now is still obviously that rotation. The interesting part is, Keith, when we've been talking over the years, almost every trade they've made, they got some arm back in return. It's just none of those guys have separated themselves. Pavetta, Lively, Eflin, Jake Thompson, none of them has really – the cream has not risen to the top with any of those trades they've made.
No, I agree with that. Most of the guys they got turned out to be back-end starters or less, and my guess is you will see the 3 through 5 spots. Nola's your 1, Arrieta's your 2. We're not worried about those guys. 3, 4, 5, I bet you they cycle through a lot of these names you just mentioned, a few others towards the top of the system. You might see Thomas Eshelman at some point in the big leagues. They'll just cycle through those guys and see if anyone's good enough to stick, maybe to hold on to a spot going forward. They're almost certainly hoping, though, that some of these great Latin American arms, and Sal Augustinelli's done such a good job on the international side. I watched their minor leagues 2 days while I was in Florida, too. They have so many guys, many of whom signed for very little money, who come from Venezuela and the Dominican, elsewhere in Latin America. Ton of power arms. Francisco Morales was 95-97 playing in essentially an extended spring-level game on one of the backfields the other day. Yeah. We talked about Sixto Sanchez. We talked about Franklin Kilome. one or two of those guys are going to bubble up next year. Not Morales, but Sixto might. Killamay probably will. Somebody like that is going to pop up in the big leagues in 19 or 20, and they're hoping that by the time they get to 20, that solves maybe two more spots in the rotation for them.
Keith, the game has changed so much, and now you're starting to see the way managers put their lineups together change. How have you seen teams kind of change the way they are putting their batting lineups together? Because one of the interesting things about this spring with Philadelphia has been nobody can figure out what Kapler's doing with this batting lineup, it seems like.
Well, in spring training, you are manipulating the lineup to get certain guys more at-bats. You really don't care. You're not trying to maximize run scoring. You don't care. You shouldn't care. If you're managing in spring training just to score more runs and win more games, you're totally doing it wrong. And I know Kapler's not doing that. I think he's playing around with guys to try to get them more at-bats, to try to get them up in certain situations, too, as you work on, quote-unquote, little things over the course of spring training. Once you get into the season, I would bet you good money that Kapler will push his best OBP guys towards the top of the lineup. I think they're really hoping that J.P. Crawford becomes a fairly high OBP guy because he's always taken good, long at-bats. He's not afraid to work deep into a count. And if he can do that and then translate that into a 350-plus on-base percentage, he might be your leadoff hitter then for the next 5 years. You get a guy like that at the top because they do have good OBP guys for the next few spots in the lineup. They could really use some clarity on guys who could hit 1 and 2 ahead of the Reese Hoskins core, and Kingery is going to be in that core fairly soon. And that's how I think they're going to end up setting their lineup. And that's how teams across baseball are starting to set their lineup. Push OBP to the top, get your best hitter in the 2 spot, and build outward from there.
Have the reports on J.P. Crawford changed at all? I know, we really liked him, and then he sounded like things were going a little sour for him, and then he came up last year. Have you heard that things have changed on him?
So, he was terrible in the first half last year, and scouts were really questioning his effort level, too.
Right.
And then he started to hit, and he got called up, and I saw him in September. I thought he looked great. And he was playing third base, totally new position for him. And again, his at-bats were really good. He didn't always get results, but he's not afraid. He's got a very good eye at the plate. He's not afraid to work deep into a count and to hit with 2 strikes. I love seeing that in a young player. And what I heard this spring, too, was he's looked great. Everyone feels like he's still doing the things he's supposed to do. He's fielding well. He's running those deep counts. He should be able to get himself on base. The biggest question I've heard on him, and this is not new, is how much power is he going to have? And will he hit for at least enough power, enough hard contact that pitchers do kind of pitch around him a little bit? He has the opportunity to get those 70 or 80 walks in addition to hitting for average. I think he will. I don't know if he ever hits 15 homers in the season, but I think he's going to have more than enough doubles power and pretty good contact rates that he'll get his OBP up there. And I really do believe he's going to be their leadoff hitter for the next several years.
Keith Law, ESPN MLB insider here. The Kingery deal, the first question everybody asked after that here is, okay, then who do they trade? Does it necessarily mean that Clintack's working the phones immediately to try to move somebody?
No, I don't think so, especially now because everyone's trying to clear rosters for 40-man spots to get guys onto their opening day rosters. This is a weird time of year to do that. I think it says between now and July 31st, either Cesar Hernandez is traded or Michael Franco is traded or otherwise relegated to the bench. I mean, if he's terrible again this year, there's a chance they just say, you're a bench player at this point, and we're not going to continue to give you at-bats at third. Obviously, they're hoping Michael comes out, has a good first half, starts to hit like he hit back when he was in Double-A and his first season or half season in the big leagues. And then you've got the great problem. You have too many players and not enough spots. And you shop Hernandez, who is a good player in the league, recognizes a good player. There just hasn't been much demand for a second baseman lately. And that's, I think, the only thing that's held them back. They might have just traded him this offseason if there had been a contender out there looking for a second baseman with 1 or 2 prospects of note they could put into a deal. It just hasn't lined up yet.
Keith Law, you look at this Phillies team. You mentioned maybe not this year, but the National League as a whole, it seems that it's pretty top-heavy. Would you agree?
Yes, very much so. I was actually working on my annual predictions post, and yes, it is very top-heavy.
Got, Washington. The National League East might be the worst division we've ever seen. If New York is as bad as it was last year, this is going to be a battle for last.
National League East and the American League Central this year could both – I don't think it's going to happen, but those are both divisions where you could have one team win close to 100 games and nobody else get over 500. It is entirely possible for both of those divisions, which just, of course, helps the team that's racing to 100 wins because they can start resting guys early and the competition is not that tough. There are a couple of teams in both those divisions. I could paint you a scenario for the Mets where they get close to 90 wins.
Sure.
I could paint you a scenario for the Twins or White Sox where that happens. It's just not likely. And you have teams like Miami's going to be atrocious this year. They're going to be unwatchably bad. And Atlanta has talent, but it's just not a very good baseball team yet. There's a lot of ability there, and they've got a lot of pitching coming. They're not as far along as the Phillies are. At least not yet, and they could be pretty ugly, especially in the first half of the season.
So is it better that the Yankees and the Red Sox seem to be relevant again, or that there would be more that the races would be more compelling? What's better for baseball? Because baseball needs some help, right?
I think baseball's audiences are good, ratings are good, attendance remains good. You worry more about the long term than the short term. The short term picture remains really strong, and people keep signing up for MLB's streaming product, which has turned out to be an enormous cash cow for the industry. Not enough of that money's getting to the players, but you'd like to think eventually it will. I think having the Yankees and or the Red Sox relevant is always a good thing because I think it generates mainstream media coverage outside of local sports coverage of baseball. But that said, really compelling pennant races are also generally a very good thing. I don't want to have to choose between the two. I'd probably just as soon have the better pennant races, but people who bemoan the Yankees being good again, I say they have such a global following. It's good if they're in it. Doesn't mean I want them to win anything, but it's good if they're relevant.
Right. I mean, back when, late 90s, mid-90s, late 90s there, you could almost pencil them in every single year. You felt like nobody else had a shot, and now they haven't been clearly on that level recently. But this team here is pretty darn good, right? I mean,
They're going to score a ton of runs. That's the biggest thing. I can paint you a scenario where that rotation is good as long as everyone's healthy. But Tanaka has that tear in his elbow we've known about. Sabathia is not the same guy he used to be. He's old and he's got injury issues. Jordan Montgomery has had a couple little injury things already. Luis Severino has one good full year as a starter in the majors. A lot could go wrong there. And suddenly they're winning 85 games and the division's a little more up for grabs at that point. So I don't see them as a lock. You're right, those late 90s teams, you felt very strongly from day one they might go wire to wire. I don't feel that way about this year's Yankees team.
Keith Law's with us, and check out his stuff in the Insider section. He's got his 2018 breakout candidates. You were out in the Cactus League a lot. I wonder, Ohtani, we don't get to see him a lot, but we've heard not very good things. You got to see him up close. What are you seeing from Ohtani, who got so much publicity and is not getting very good publicity right now?
I saw him pitch. I didn't see him hit. I don't think he's going to hit. I didn't even think it was worth my time to go see him hit. Because a swing that long is not going to produce enough contact over here. He didn't pitch well when I saw him. His stuff was okay. He was up to 95 repeatedly. It is a knockout slider. I mean, it is going to be one of the best sliders in baseball. He was having real delivery issues, mechanical issues, just not getting to his release point, and as a result was missing his spots with just about every pitch. Really got knocked around by the Tijuana Toros of the Mexican League. Now, I know it's exhibition, but that's hard contact to be given up on stuff that good. That's a pretty bad sign. And he looked frustrated by the third inning or so that he was not hitting that release point regularly. If you don't hit your release point, hard to really command the fastball. And until he gets to that point, he may not be ready to contribute as a major league starter. I'm not saying that he's bad. I'm not saying he's going to be a bust at all. There's way too much talent there. But maybe he's not ready to step in right now and be a top 10 pitcher in baseball, which I think what the Angels were expecting when they signed him.
All right, let's take a look real quick and get Keith's picks for this season. East is Yankees?
I still have the Yankees, but the way I've drawn it up right now, I have them beating the Red Sox by a game, which is essentially like punting.
Who wins the Central?
That's Cleveland, in a rout.
West?
Houston. Also probably in a rout, but I think the Angels are improved.
And your two wild cards?
Were Boston and the Angels. And there's a little bias there. I kind of want to see the Angels get in. I want to see Mike Trout in the playoffs.
Absolutely. He's 10 minutes up the road from us here. Everybody wants to see Mike Trout into the playoffs. All right, who wins the NL West?
NL West, I have the Dodgers.
Dodgers, all right. Central?
Cubs. This is boring, right? It's most of the teams that won last year.
Well, yeah, and the East has got to be Washington.
Got to be Washington. I have them winning by almost 20 games.
Got to, right? It's not even fun. But the two wild cards in the National League could be interesting.
That could be very interesting. I totally agree with you there. I have St. Louis and Arizona, but they're close enough where I've got the Mets just a couple games out of it, the Rockies just a couple games out. The Brewers, man, if they had one more good starting pitcher, I would feel very good about them in the wild card. But I went back and looked through it again, looked at projections for all of their starters, just not buying it. It's a much improved team, but they are clearly one, maybe two, but one good Major League starter short of these other clubs I'm talking about.
Keith Law, the Major League Baseball season is here. The spring training is in the books, and let's get this baby cooking. We'll see if the Phillies can be compelling and much more compelling than the conversations we've had the last 5 years. That's for sure, Keith.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. We're not going to be discussing a bunch of dump trades in July. I feel better about that.
All right, pal. We'll talk again soon.
Yep, my pleasure.